For those of you that don't know me, I'm Stephanie Byra. I am the chapter president this year. So thank you to everyone that's taking time out of your evening to jump on. Hopefully you didn't have too much storm damage, and hopefully you've got enough power. And if you don't, hopefully you're charged up enough to make it through the next hour. So thanks so much for jumping on. This is an exciting thing that we have tonight. It is a part of a series that we are doing, and before we get into the graduate school to go or not go, I did want to bring to your attention that we have another program coming up on August 18th from 5:30 to 6:30, talking about the agency perspective. So talking about the opportunities that exist within an agency world versus in-house work. So that's going to be on the 18th with representatives from Ann Buchanan from Buchanan PR, Stephanie DeVitri from Evoke, and Jack Horner from HornerCom. So be sure to sign up and get registered for that as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake.
Madam President, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for taking some time this evening on the aftermath of Category 1 hurricane. Some of you may have power, some of you may not, but some of us on the line have power, some of us don't, but the show must go on. So I'm Dr. Jacob Farbman. I'm the Executive Director of the Statewide Center for Student Success as part of New Jersey's community college system. Long time, before getting that promotion, long time Communications Director, Advancement Director for the community college system in New Jersey. Prior to that, did some work in healthcare, did some work in agency work, but nonetheless, I've had a pretty successful and blessed career. When the folks from the PRSA board said, hey, we're doing this and we think grad school might be a good thing to talk with folks about, I said, oh, I'd love to help in some way, shape, or form. So I've recruited two of the very best people I know in the industry. First, Ashley Reed, who is one of my former students at TCNJ, also did some work with us at the Council of County Colleges as an intern for a semester. Please, Ashley, don't quiz me and ask me to remember what semester that was. But she was great. And my longtime friend and colleague, Jeff Pettifer, who I have known, he'll talk about his experience from his work at Atlantic Cape Community College. He helped me launch the New Jersey Star Scholarship Program back in the early 2000s, and we've served over 30,000 students throughout the state since we started that program statewide. So I'm forever indebted to Jeff for helping us with that. We're going to have a more informal conversation among the three of us about graduate school, to go, to not to go, challenges we've all faced, things to expect, some words of wisdom and advice. And we're coming to it from three different perspectives. Perspective one, going to graduate school right from undergrad. Perspective two, being that returning student, being in the workforce for a while and coming back. And then perspective three, doing both. Which I did, and we'll go from there. So let me just make sure I can advance the slides without messing this thing up. Okay, so here's our agenda for the evening. I'm going to talk big picture. Any of my students who come to me, any folks who come to me, should I go to grad school, Jake? Yes. So I'm going to give you the bottom line, end of the day, reason why you should. Ashley and Jeff are going to talk a little bit more practical as far as, what it means for their careers and how it can help them. Lessons learned, get some advice. I'm also going to talk a little bit about paying the cost. How can you do this with as minimal out-of-pocket as possible, out-of-pocket expense as possible? And yes, it's doable, it's possible. The three of us on the line did get assistance to go back to school and get graduate degrees. It's possible, it's doable. I also want to spend a little bit of time, if you're not at that point in your career right now, where you want to invest a year, 2 years, 3 years to go back to graduate school, there is a program the PRSA offers. I happen to be the accreditation chair for the Philadelphia chapter. Accreditation in public relations, APR. There are a few of us who have that designation. It does help in your career to get that. We'll also talk a little bit about post-baccalaureate certifications that are offered by graduate schools and things of that nature that could serve as an onboard, as a stackable credential towards a graduate degree. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So let's start with why you should go to graduate school. I like to tell my students, You have to make yourself as marketable as possible in the ever-changing job market. I'm a communication major, master's in public relations, doctorate in education. The job I have did not exist when I went to college in the 1990s. Didn't exist. There are going to be jobs that exist 5 years from now, 2 years from now, that don't exist now. And at the same time, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are jobs that did exist that aren't coming back for a long time. If you look at the bottom line end of the day as to why you might want to think about going to graduate school, every longitudinal research study that I've seen, whether it's from the United States Department of Education, Jobs for the Future, Association of Community Colleges, Institute for Higher Education Policy, every longitudinal study that I've ever seen shows that regardless of discipline, you will make more money over the course of your career with the more education you have. Period. End of sentence. The more education you have, the better off you're going to be. Not just as far as what your weekly earnings may be. If you look at this chart, with a master's degree, you probably get $200-300 more a week than you would with just a bachelor's degree. Now, I know there are some folks who are naysayers who say, yeah, but in the communication industry, you've got to know how to write, you've got to be creative, you got to know how to pitch, you got to know how to make things happen, boo, 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 boo. Not necessarily skills you can teach at the graduate level, although there are programs that do train people to be public relations practitioners that are graduate in nature. So, but you also look on the flip side. What are your chances? And this is pre-COVID data. What are the chances of being unemployed, depending on how much education you have? And you look at the very top, bachelor's, master's, doctorate degree, 2.0 employment rate and less, compared to with just a bachelor's degree, 2.2, associate degree, 2.7, only a high school, 3.7% unemployment rate. So the more education you have, the more likely you will have the essential skills and abilities that employers are looking for, regardless of discipline, regardless of industry, that you can fill a job and get a job if you're in a position where you have to get a job because you got to pay the bills and take care of the kids, as opposed to you have no training, no post-secondary recognized credentials whatsoever. Okay, now let's look at some real-time labor market data about unemployment rates. Right now, for people who only have a high school degree and some college no degree, unemployment's 17.3%. 17.3%. If you have a bachelor's degree, the unemployment rate is 8.4%. So that's much higher than the 2.2% we just saw a minute ago. And that's the impact of the pandemic. However, if you look at, as of May 2020, COVID-19 and new employment, look at this. The chances are almost double, 20%, 21% higher, so almost double, that if you have a master's degree, you can get a job in this environment compared to just having a bachelor's degree. So there's evidence right there that speaks to the value of getting a master's degree, a post-baccalaureate degree in some way, shape, or form, right? Let's see, what's next? I'm going to turn it over to Ashley.
Hi. Okay, we can advance to the next slide. Perfect. So, as Jake said, I went right from undergrad at TCNJ to my master's degree at the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. And a lot happened between the end of my senior year when I was getting ready to graduate at TCNJ and when I finally decided where I wanted to go to school. In a lot of cases, it was kind of like a late game decision. So I'll just kind of talk through these points and apply my experience to each one. So know what you want out of grad school. I knew that, I didn't necessarily want at the time to go for my PhD. I knew that getting this master's degree in communications was going to be something for me that was a stepping stone to the corporate world, to working at a company, to working at an agency, doing either in-house communications or PR, something along those lines. And because of that, I knew to look for programs where it was integrated within the curriculum, that you would either be getting some kind of professional experience, you would be working with, certain mentors. That was very, very important to me to know beforehand. Secondly, I needed to know what I could afford, because I was very blessed in that I got into a few different programs, and I consulted with a few different people, Jake included, on where I should be going to school. I got into a program at Emerson for health communication that on paper looked great. I got an excellent fellowship to that school, but it didn't cover everything. And cost of living in Boston is quite high. It is in New Jersey too, but I have family here. So for me, it just didn't make sense to go into more and more debt, even though I was getting all the financial aid that a program could give me. So at Rutgers, I was able to secure a fellowship with Johnson & Johnson, where I was getting that hands-on work experience, as well as getting my education paid for the first year. So my advice is definitely research financial aid. I was annoying. I don't care. Like, when I was applying to schools at Rutgers, they told me that applications for certain financial aid had closed when I never received information about it. So then I looked around on their website and I saw this Johnson & Johnson fellowship, and I emailed the head of the program and I said, "Hey, I'd like to be considered for this." And they said, "Okay." So they let me. I don't know if that's above board, but they let me do it. You got to make sure you're advocating for yourself the whole entire time. Find a cheerleader or mentor. So any experience that you have, be it in the classroom, at any of your undergraduate internships, you need to find yourself a cheerleader or a mentor. And this is somebody that believes in you. This is somebody that wants the best for you. There are some people that kind of toe the line between just being your professor and being like a mentor. And frankly, in academia, we all know, like, sometimes it can be a little bit political. So, trust your gut, trust your heart. To me, that's always been really good in finding people who care about me, who care about my future, and who want me to succeed. And I found that the people who really had my best interests at heart were the people who told me, "Ashley, you have a lot going on. It's not good for you to be in debt. Go to Rutgers. What are you doing?" So to me, that was also part of my decision. What did my really trusted mentors and cheerleaders think? Discuss with your undergrad professors. So here, this might be difficult if you're, and Jeff can speak to this, obviously, if you're going back to get your professional degree, you're not going to reach out to your professor from, I don't know how many years ago. They might not remember who you are if you haven't been keeping in touch every year and sending a Christmas card. So for me, I was very fortunate that in my decision to go right from undergrad to my graduate school, I had people that I could talk with who had been there, like Jake and my other teachers who obviously went on to get their PhDs. I was able to talk to them about their experiences, what I can expect, not just from a course load perspective, but, what is my day-to-day going to really look like when I am, in it, stressed out, working. It was really good to have those people that I could talk to. Meet and interview with program leaders from the schools you're interested in. So obviously, if you're planning to go to a school that's, on the other side of the country, this might be a little bit difficult, but now that we are entering the new normal, it's a even more digital world. It might actually be easier nowadays to kind of get these face-to-face meetings with these program leaders. I know personally, I was able to talk to one of my professors who was going to the NJCA, yes, the Communication Association conference in DC. So I went there with my professor and a couple other really awesome students from TCNJ, and some of them presented their research, while that evening I went around to all the graduate school presentations, and they had like little mixers, and I made sure I got to know everybody that I had to get to know. And those interpersonal relationships that I formed made it very easy for me to reach out after the fact and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in your program. Can you tell me more about it? what are some things that I can do to, you know, make sure I can get this program paid for because I'm really interested in it. And frankly, every school that I made a personal connection with, I was accepted to and got a financial aid package. Finally, for GREs, the I didn't really stress about the GREs personally because I knew that the programs I was applying to, I had great letters of recommendation, I had great grades, I had already met the leaders of the respective programs. So I went, I took the test, I studied a lot beforehand, but after I got the results, I didn't retake it. I reached out to all my contacts at the schools and I said, hey, this was my score. Is this okay? Is this acceptable to you? Frankly, I'll retake it if you need me to. And every single one of them came back like, Ashley, we know who you are. Don't stress about it. So making those personal connections can really help, especially if you're like me and maybe you're not the strongest standardized test taker. And we can progress. Okay, so here I'm just going to talk about my specific experience at Rutgers with the fellowship that I got. So here, I think it's really important for me to highlight, like, yes, I went and I got a fellowship to J&J. It was really cool to work hands-on there. But for me, what was really important was not only did I get to work at this company that has a really great reputation, but there were professors that I had at Rutgers who also worked at J&J. So this really helped me kind of think like, yes, I'm getting my master's degree. I know that I want to work in a professional at an agency or something doing PR, but this kind of helped me narrow down even further. For example, the head of corporate equity at J&J taught a corporate social responsibility class, and I loved it. And that had a really big impact on my career later on. That said, I want to be kind of candid about this experience too. When I first applied to Rutgers, you know, some of the financial aid fell through in that the fellowship was supposed to last 2 years and it lasted 1 year. So secure your financial aid before you say yes. Further, be prepared to, you know, expect the unexpected in some certain circumstances. For me, I've always worked through school, so for me, this wasn't the biggest issue. I just went right back to work when the fellowship ended, and for me, it was okay. I think that's about it. Although I could say that part of going to school while you are working, you just have to mentally prepare yourself for, you know, you're going to go to work during the day and then you're going to go to class until maybe 9:30. You're going to be exhausted. So that should also be something personally that you're taking into account when you're deciding to go back to school after just having finished school. You don't want to go dive into a master's program when you're already burnt out. You should understand the personal and emotional load that this is going to take on you. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about how having a master's degree impacted my career, because that's, I'm sure, what we're all here for. So frankly, this graphic that I created has some internships on there, and it also has some part-time consultancy positions that I took while I was in school because I just never stopped working. So first I was at J&J doing the fellowship in 2014. And as part of that fellowship, I had an opportunity to further my interests in corporate equity and social responsibility. And I was able to lead comms for the United Way campaign that J&J does annually. So for me, that was a lot of fun, and another reason why you should look into the programs that you're applying to, because you want to make sure you can have opportunities like this while you're in grad school. To me, it was completely made my experience. And if you're going in to further your education for a PhD, I think Jeff and Jake can speak to that a little bit better than I can, but just making sure that the schools you're applying to have those connections to make sure you can get to the next step in your career. So then after my fellowship at J&J, I started a short internship at JFK Communications. I was able to get course credit for this. I was able to connect with my fellow classmates, which was how I heard about this in the first place. So again, making sure that It might be a little harder nowadays, you know, considering that maybe if you go back to school very soon, you might be remote, but your peers in a master's program are your future coworkers. So definitely make connections with those people, because I would not have found out about this really awesome internship I was able to take without Shelby, one of my classmates. So there I did PR, I did, you know, the whole cold calling, pitch writing, you know, press release writing. So that was just a really great hands-on experience for me. I did that for 6 months as a paid internship for credit. And then I was able to take a part-time consultancy back at J&J. So obviously the connections I made there the first time really paid off for me. I was able to go back part-time while I was in school. That was a contract position, so that ended in about a year, where I then, while I was still in school, went on to work at Precision for Value. They are now Precision Value. They are a managed markets agency up in Gladstone, New Jersey. So again, using my background in pharma, and they also looked at my master's degree that I hadn't even earned yet, and they thought that was great that I was going for more education. They really wanted me on board. So post Precision for Value, and right when I graduated, I went to my employer and I said, hey, I graduated. And they weren't willing to compensate for me having a master's degree. And this is what I think a lot of people worry about, especially in communications. They're like, why are you getting a master's in communications when, you know, all these people who don't further their education can also go be an account coordinator and work their way up? And that's honestly completely true. I guess you could do that, but when you're going right from undergrad to your master's degree, you're not going to see immediate payoff, even though personally, I think I was very enriched and well compensated throughout here. You're going because it opens more doors for you down the road, which I'll get into as I go forward. So then I went to work at Freedom Mortgage in their public relations and philanthropy department. And this was an awesome opportunity because it hit all the marks that I learned that I was really striving for while I was getting my master's degree. We did all kinds of great stuff. We had, you know, huge events multiple times a year. We did a lot of philanthropic events for Homes for Our Troops, for the USO of South Jersey and Philadelphia. Really awesome projects that I got to work on the whole time I was there. They had a youth mentorship program that I absolutely loved participating in. And then they started laying people off because the housing industry, or the loan business, I should say, at that time wasn't really looking up for Freedom Mortgage. So I decided, after being told that wages were being frozen, you know, I had to advocate for myself and say, hey, I'm educated. I can't work somewhere where they're freezing our wages and they're telling me that there's no upward mobility. Again, you have to fiercely advocate for yourself at every stage, because if you are young and you're going from your undergraduate degree to a master's degree, people are going to tell you that you don't deserve things, even though you have experience to back it up. So for me, it was very important to, you know, very nicely advocate for myself and say, all right, I can't do this right now. So I did a part-time consultancy at Prudential while I kind of gathered my thoughts and really thought about where I wanted to work, what I wanted to do. And it was actually still a great opportunity for me because they were paying me well. You know, there's a certain salary threshold that you can demand when you have a master's degree, even when you're consulting. So for me, that was huge. So I was able to work at Prudential. It was just a temporary contract and it was great. I learned a lot. I met a lot of really cool people, and I learned about UX design, UX research. So for me, that just enriched me as a person, and it bumped up my salary even more. So today I work at JK Design as an account manager, and all the experiences that you see on this page were the result of me having gone for my master's degree. And where I am today is all my clients are J&J clients because we're an NJ-based agency. All of my clients know who I am. They're very comfortable with me. I've been able to grow my accounts by like hundreds of thousands of dollars because I know these people and they trust me to open new lines of business when they move to another department. So for me, it's been really great. And I was actually hired because of all the experiences that I have with J&J and the master's degree that I earned. So all of that is just to say, you might not have a linear path. You might not have had a linear path up until this point, but you still control your own narrative. You still control your own story. And people are going to tell you that, you know, I went out and I tried to apply for a job and they didn't care that I had a master's degree. Okay, well, why are you applying for that job? Why are you undervaluing yourself? I haven't had that experience. So to me, it's really about, you know, not only the degree that you have, it's knowing your own value and knowing that you need to advocate for yourself in order to achieve that career that you want. So we can move forward. So lessons learned from having gone to grad school. For me, no experience is irrelevant unless you allow it to be. So you need to find the value in wherever you are. You can go to Princeton and get your master's and still not find a job if you're not advocating for yourself and if you don't feel that you deserve a better position. For me, some of the most valuable experiences I've had have been when I'm consulting or if I'm contracting part-time, because I'm still networking and meeting with all of these people. Know your worth. I think I touched on that a lot up until this point. And then finally, it's okay to change your path based on new experiences. A poet that I read once said that, you know, part of changing your mind is proof that you have one to begin with. So for me, I made sure to learn from every experience that I had, and it shaped the career I've had up until this point. So I'm definitely thankful that I went to graduate school. It shaped my entire career up until this point. I can't stress that enough.
Ashley, before we advance the slide and turn it over to Jeff, I just want to reemphasize a critical point that you brought up on during the last slide and this one also to everybody. And I don't want to sound like a personal trainer, but I'm going to sound like a personal trainer. Whatever it is in your life that you don't like, you have the power to change it. And there's always going to be somebody else who wants it more. There's always going to be somebody who wants it more. Why can't it be you? You've got to have that drive. You've got to want to do that hustle. And look, you got 3 people on the line here. We've pushed the boulders up the mountains. We've been there. We did it. You know, Ashley talked about her aid was cut out from under. It was a 2-year program. They took it away. You know, they cut it. But she found a way, right? Jeff's going to talk about his experiences. He found a way. All right. So it can be done. You just have to have persistence. And you got to know that there are people in your professional network who will support you, who will be that shoulder for you to cry on. And God knows when I was in doctoral school, I cried on my wife's shoulder. My God, I'm surprised she didn't divorce me. But anyway, let me move on. And we'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Jake, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm Jeffrey Pettifer. I am the Executive Director of University Relations and Marketing at Stockton University, and I want to talk a little bit about my background, my history, and journey, and then get into some of the factors that I had to deal with as somebody who completed an undergraduate degree back in the early 90s and then took 20 years to complete the MBA. So Jake, if we can move to the next slide, I can start that conversation. So my professional experience is about 27 plus years now. It really feels weird saying that because I don't feel like I've been doing it that long, but it's true. Also, I've spent some time as an adjunct professor. When I graduated from Stockton, believe it or not, back in '92, I had already started a radio career. I was a disc jockey at a radio station in Cape May County, New Jersey, and really thought that might be my future. But then life happened, right? I was married, I started building a family and realizing maybe a transient radio career isn't really for me. So I was looking for some stability in my life and noticed that there was a job in the newspaper when they used to find jobs in newspapers at Atlantic Community College, which then became Atlantic Cape Community College. And I was an administrative assistant. Now, keep in mind, I'd gone and done my undergrad work, got a marketing degree, my bachelor's degree, and I started, you know, as an admin assistant at the community college. About 8-9 years later, I had an opportunity to become the director of marketing at Atlantic Cape, and served in that role for quite a few years until an opportunity opened up at Stockton, which was a natural fit for me. It was a nice advancement in my career, but again, still doing this with the challenge in higher ed of only having a bachelor's degree. So that's some of the challenge that Jake was alluding to in terms of the struggles in higher ed. For those of you that may be familiar, you know, they value you continuing your education. And here I am just working hard, moving up in the ranks with a bachelor's degree. So I always let my work speak for me, and add that value to what I was able to do on the job and through projects. Outside of higher ed, again, you know, I've had some experiences as a freelance graphic designer, marketing consultant, and of course the radio and some acting mixed in there too. But there came a time in my life where I realized, you know what, I really got to get moving here. If I'm going to go anywhere in my career, or even beyond, say, the traditional career where I can choose my own path and make my own rules, I'm really going to need to continue my education. So if we can go to the next slide, I can sort of talk about some of these questions that I had to ask myself. As a professional, somebody with a family, obviously there's a lot to juggle, right? So number one, I had to figure out a lot of different things. Number one, could I even afford it? You know, I wasn't making a lot of money, and I had a family and I had obligations. So where's this extra money going to come from? And even though I was at Atlantic Cape when I started my master's sort of journey, the reimbursement wasn't tremendous. So there was a lot of out-of-pocket expense. And I chose, you know, very early on to just take one class at a time, non-matriculated, to sort of get my feet wet. So of course, after the affordability issue comes in, you know, a variety of other questions. Number one, how is this going to impact my daily life? Is it going to enhance my career? You know, at that point, I was unsure. I was moving up in the ranks. I was getting promoted. What's the master's going to do for me? You know, do I have the time? With all the normal duties, you know, on the job and with a family and extracurricular, wow, I'm really going to have to set some time aside to do this. And then finally, as a manager, maybe, you know, I could make this to, you know, work to my benefit. Just, you know, struggling through the education, maybe I could take that and use that in real time while I was on the job. So these were some of the things that I thought about, weighed the pros and cons, and obviously didn't drop any of those balls and decided to move forward. So we can go to the next slide. So once I answered all those questions, it was now time to start really looking at what I wanted to do. And here's where I can offer a little bit of advice. Yes, you've made the decision to go to graduate school, but you know, what type of instruction preference do you have? Remember, when I was in school as an undergrad, I didn't have online. In fact, the internet wasn't even around, at least in the practical sense that we deal with it now. So working on a computer was, you know, basically blinking lights and a black screen with green text. That was it. So the in-person experience of learning was something I was familiar with and I felt very comfortable with. So when I started my master's journey, I started looking for those types of options. However, especially now, you know, with COVID-19, online obviously, or blended or hybrid versions of instruction are things that you may want to be looking for. There are advantages and disadvantages to each. As I mentioned before, I had been an adjunct professor, so I understood the other side of it in terms of what I might be able to get from a professor having been one. You know, I could establish a closer relationship, in my opinion, than trading messages online in a message board. I could interact with my fellow students, and I will tell you that, you know, in some of my my classes, I've had the opportunity to engage with people who are, you know, at the same level as a professional as me, who have just gotten into their field as a professional. And of course, looking at the second bullet there, I also had graduate classes that included students that hadn't even gotten their undergrad yet because of dual degree options. So it was a really mixed bag. And, you know, there are some advantages and disadvantages to that too. If you come into a class, and it's whether it's online or in person, and you have the most experience in the room as a student, get ready to be called upon often to give examples, to show things that, you know, the other students just simply haven't had the experience to experience, I guess. So I've sort of been called upon often in my classes to provide examples, real life examples, or my perspective, having been exposed to a lot of different things based on an objective or a concept. So you may want to do a little bit of exploration in an individual school's program to find out what type of students are they welcoming into their program and whether or not that's going to fit for you. Of course, one of the huge benefits of me going back to school was being able to apply what I was learning. But more importantly, and this was the really cool part, which may happen to some of you, a lot of us have gut instincts, right? We have intuition, we have experience that, you know, we draw from when we have to make another decision. Well, it turns out, thankfully for me, that, you know, in taking management classes or even classes related to my field of marketing, there was a lot of validation that I had made some really smart decisions when dealing with a coworker, or when dealing with somebody that I managed, or a path to take from a strategic standpoint for a particular project or initiative. At the same time, there was a lot that I learned that I was able to then apply to what I was doing on a daily basis. So those were all good things. The other thing I want to point out before we move to the next slide, something that Ashley had talked about in terms of looking for mentors and sort of getting feedback on what type of program may be best for you. As a professional, somebody who worked in management, I was able to reach out to my peers who were also going for their graduate degree or may have recently completed theirs. I was able to sort of talk to them and find out, you know, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and get some feedback. One of the silver linings in that process was discovering that there were some coworkers of mine that were at the same point in their master's career, earning their credits that I was, and we ended up forming a small little cohort to sort of learn together. What a huge advantage that was. So if you can team up with people, whether it's friends or fellow students, you have the opportunity to sort of bounce questions off of one another, ask, you know, hey, do you get this? Are you not getting this? I'm not getting this. What can you do to help me out here? Everybody brings a little something different to the table too, which really helps in group projects. Being a creative person, I was the one who always did the presentations in terms of constructing them. But everybody added their little piece, and collectively, you know, I never got less than an A on one of my presentations. So that's a good thing. We can move to the next slide, Jake, please.
Jeff, I want to just add one quick thing before we
Sure.
move that has to do with instruction preference and structure of program. You hit the nail on the head that, you know, some of the programs that folks may be looking into may be more the traditional route: enroll in the fall, enroll in the spring, take summer courses over a 16-week period. You take it, whether it's one course, two course, a full-time course load. Another thing that has really grown in popularity over the last 20 years is this concept of accelerated degrees. They're primarily targeted to working professionals. And I share that with you because the accelerated degrees aren't the, you know, you go in the fall, you got a winter break over the holiday, then you go back after Martin Luther King Day, then you're off for a couple weeks before it, no. I did an accelerated program for my doctorate. I had 1 week off a year for 3 years while we did coursework. It was tough. But the point is that you can look for those accelerated programs as models to decrease your time to degree. In other words, accelerate your time to degree, and you get the degree faster as opposed to going the traditional route. Another thing to consider as you make a decision as to whether or not you want to take this journey.
And just let me follow up on that, Jake, as you bring us to the next slide. In my case, Stockton is, you know, more of a traditional model. You know, I went for the 15-week-long semesters. Online classes were the same length, with the exception of summer. Summer classes or sessions can be a real advantage if you have the time. Sometimes you can even double up in the summer and earn a lot of credits in a short period of time. Look, you're going to have to put in the work. And again, that brings us to this slide. You really have to pace yourself. Okay, you know, you're hungry, you're ready to dig right in. You've got all the ingredients, you know, to make that dish. You made the dish, and wow, You know, we've all gone into restaurants or we've had meals where, you know, our eyes are bigger than our stomach. So you want to be careful not to get into a situation like that. So make sure you sort of plan things out. You know, a lot of advisors at universities and colleges will help walk you through what that journey looks like. A lot of them have online tools where you can sort of pace it out before you even get there and see what that map looks like. For me, you know, it was one class a semester, and then I'm like, all right, I'm getting the hang of this. So I take 2 classes a semester. And within my last year, I ended up taking 7 classes, 2 in the summer, 3 in the fall, which included an online. And then during this last spring semester, when COVID broke out, I was doing an independent study and my capstone at the same time. And as the chief marketing officer for the university, it was quite a challenge, but I had the experience of knowing how to pace myself at that time. So I was able to sort of manage it pretty well. So making the time is important. And when I say make the time, be prepared. You know, those weekends where you want to go out and hang out with your friends or do stuff with your family, children, if you have them, some of that unfortunately is going to have to be put aside. Unless you're somebody who only needs 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, you're going to have to break those weekends out and really shut things down. And when I say shut it down, that means get rid of all your distractions. Put the phone away, turn the TV off. It's okay if you want to play a little music in the background, but really, you'll end up saying, you know what, I'm going to devote an hour to this project, and before you know it, you're 4 hours into it and realizing, where did all that time go? So make sure you make the time and stretch things out. And keeping in mind that now you've got that work, life, and school balance. You know, that sense of accomplishment when you get a project done or you complete a class is very rewarding. That's the sort of motivation that I use to sort of keep pushing forward. Listen, it's a very short period of time if you devote yourself to it. You don't need to do it in the 20-year span that I did it. You can usually get it done within 2 or 3 years if you really commit. Or you can actually do it quicker than that based on some of the programs that Jake was describing. So again, you've got to assess yourself. I can't tell you what your journey is going to be like. I can't tell you what you should do. You're going to have to assess it yourself. The last thing, which obviously is going to determine how you want to move forward or whether or not you want to do this, is to ask yourself, is this going to be worth it for me? And I will tell you that if you asked me that question 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I got 6 credits under my belt. I'm really successful right now in my career. I don't need it. But having gone through it and in the industry that I'm in right now, I can tell you I would have loved to have done it sooner. So if you end up like me where, you know, you've got a few years under your belt and you need to go back to school, it's great. You know what? It's always going to be there for you. But if you can do it a little bit sooner with, in my opinion, a little bit of experience behind you, I think you'll really benefit more from the experience. It may open a few more doors for you. And I think it's going to be something that you're going to cherish for the rest of your life. And it also makes an impression as a father, okay? It makes an impression on your family and your kids. I have 2 daughters that are in their 20s, and they couldn't be more proud of their dad, who earned a master's degree, well, at least after one of them had already earned their master's. So we were a little competitive. My daughter got there before I did, but I was right behind her, and I think the other one's going to end up doing it too because she saw her sister and her dad do it. So there are a lot of benefits to it. It's definitely worth it, and I wish you all the success in the world if you choose to take this on.
That's great, Jeff. That's terrific. Ashley, Jeff, what wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing your experiences, words of wisdom, even the trying parts of the journey. So I want to talk a little bit about turkey, right? Isn't that the old expression, talk turkey? Let's talk turkey. So here's the practical, down-to-earth advice, and Ashley might have alluded to it before she came into my office a little upset. I want to go to Emerson. I got the best assistantship they're going to give me. Great. How much are they giving me? She told me, that's great. Yeah, but it's double that. Oh, boy. And this professor tells me I need to go there. And I said to her, is this professor paying you a bill? She said, no. I said, well, I'd go to Rutgers if I were you. So my point is that, you know, Jeff and I are in these circles in higher education, and we know that any program from an accredited college university in our case, in our part of the woods region, Middle States Higher Education, Middle States Commission on Higher Education, right? Any program that's accredited through the institution, that's accredited through partnership with industry, business and industry, it has to have those connections to the workforce that enable you to get experience from adjunct professors who work in the field, that enable you to get internships, information interview opportunities, that enable you to strengthen and get yourself placed in that career field. So whether we're talking about Princeton or TCNJ or Stockton or Penn or Temple, all of these institutions are accredited by Middle States. They all have to have those, their graduate programs all have to have those in business and industry partnerships. Or if we're talking about a degree in education, those partnerships with school districts or other colleges and universities and like education entities. So the point is that people say, oh, you know, it matters where you go. Well, to some extent, if you are on the line tonight and money's not a problem for you, I need a grant, not a loan, I need a grant. You can send it to the Farbman Family Foundation, all right? But if you're like the 99% of us who money is always an issue, you go where you don't have to pay or you don't have to pay the most out of pocket, all right? I was able to go to graduate school. I was recruited when I was at Rowan. My junior year, they said, Jake, we want you to stay here and do a graduate assistantship. I'm like, I never heard of that. Poor country boy, Elmer, New Jersey, Salem County. What's that? So he told me what it was. It sounds like a good deal to me. So basically, let me tell you a little bit about a graduate assistantship, teaching assistantship. They're both technically the same thing. So here's what happens. Every college and university has these, but you can't just Google search them. You got to dig. You got to dig. Like Ashley said, she had to dig and find the Johnson & Johnson Fellowship. You got to dig, 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 dig. You got to be persistent. You got to ask questions. But basically what it is, it's the best kept secret in higher education, meaning programs need to recruit students. And so the universities, the colleges provide financial incentives for students to come. So what does that mean? In my case, I was recruited. I worked part-time in an office at the university as a graduate assistantship. I worked part-time in an office. I went to school full-time. My compensation was a very small stipend for living expenses, but then my tuition was paid for. So all I had to worry about were fees and books. And you know, my grandmother lived close. She let me live there for a year while I was doing my graduate program. God bless her. So, so I was able to do it. And I had student loans. My loans were frozen as long as I was a full-time grad student. My loans were frozen. Interest rate didn't go up. I didn't owe more. I still owed the same amount when I finished my master's degree as I owed when I finished my bachelor's degree. Now, what's the difference between graduate assistantship, teaching assistantship? Instead of working in an office like the admissions office or the publications office or the marketing office, you know, working with Jeff, you work directly for a professor. And you would grade that professor's papers, do that professor's research, help that professor write his or her articles that they're submitting to scholarly publications and peer-reviewed journals. You would teach freshman level seminar courses that professor, you would co-teach classes with that professor. You know, you would work directly for a professor, but the concept is the same. You would get as your compensation, tuition paid for, and a stipend. Now, here's the rub. It's not universal, right? I had a student go to Syracuse, one of the best graduate communication programs, and she got the top assistantship, 25% of her tuition. 25%, that was it. Syracuse doesn't give anything more than 25%. So you need to look around and see what those compensation packages look like. We've had instances where we've had students that, you know, from TCNJ, they apply to 2 schools, and the 2 schools actually bid to get this student because this student is so sought after. And it's because she did what Ashley did. Went to these conferences, networked with the program coordinators, networked with the professors, impressed them, and they wanted her to come to their school. So if you have that opportunity, take advantage of it. Now, the thing, of course, is that, you know, you look at it as a package deal. And if you get full tuition somewhere, but you've got to pay for fees and books and living expenses, but then somewhere else they give you tuition and then they give you the fees and the stipends a little more, programs being equal, they're both the same, you know, MBA or Masters of Communication, you go with the one that's going to compensate you the most. That's always been my advice to people, and it has served me well. Now, fast forward, I went back to school to get my doctorate. I did the same thing as Jeff. I got tuition reimbursement. People think tuition reimbursement's a great thing. It is, but there are some misconceptions. Number one, you still have to have the money before the semester to pay the bill. It's called reimbursement. You got to pay the bill up front. And getting the credit card statement and seeing that kind of purchase on there, you got to have money in the bank or you're paying 28, 29% interest, until you pay that down. And then tuition reimbursement policies are different based on the employer. Some employers may give you full tuition. That's great. Some employers may only give you a percentage of your tuition based on your grade. If you get an A, you get 80%. If you get a B, you get 70%. Some employers like mine, they capped it. My graduate program was more expensive than the Rutgers rate. So I only got the Rutgers rate reimbursed. It paid for about 60% of my doctorate degree. I'm very grateful. I couldn't have done it without that 60%, but it was still a lot of money out of my pocket, but that's okay. The investment has paid off in the long run. So tuition reimbursement is something to look at, that it's going to be different based on your employer. It's not a guarantee. And the other thing too, there are some examples, some pilots going on throughout the country. It's taking place in Indiana, I know, at a few community colleges. There are some pilots throughout the country where employers are no longer doing tuition reimbursement. They're paying the bill up front. Now, if you get a job with an employer who'll pay the bill up front, God bless you. That's the ideal situation, because that's the move. Because you take that responsibility and that burden of the tuition off the table, it improves retention and completion rates. All right, studies have shown that across the board. So graduate assistantship, teaching assistantship, you've got to dig for on the college website. You may have to call, you may have to go in person or do a Zoom and talk to some program coordinators, find out what they're all about. And you really got to push for those. The other piece about graduate assistantships, teaching assistantships that I'll just share with all of you. Typically, the offices or the professors on campus who are filling these positions, they have access to your graduate application. So they'll see your GRE scores, your college credential, this, that, and the other, your resume, your essays. They'll see the recommendations from the people who wrote the recommendations to get you into the program. So I always tell students, there's typically going to be a requirement to have 1, 2, or 3 additional recommendations for those specific assistantships. Don't ask the same person who wrote the letter to get you into the program to write you a letter for the assistantship, because those folks already saw your letter. Have a diverse population of references who can vouch for you, who can write you. If 3 people write your application recommendation, you have two others write your recommendation for the assistantship. All right, just my advice to you folks. All right, let's see what's next here on the agenda. Okay, so let's transition a little bit. We threw a lot at you tonight. So you might be thinking, oh, this is great. I'd love to go back to grad school someday, but it's too much to invest in. Well, we do have a post-secondary industry valued credential through Public Relations Society of America. Doesn't take quite as long as a master's degree. It's called the Accredited in Public Relations. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of us have it already. It's recommended that you have at least 5 years full-time public relations experience. You have a bachelor's degree in communication specific field, or at least equivalent work experience where you've instituted public relations principles, you've done a lot of writing, you've participated or managed in public relations campaigns with formative research, monitoring research, evaluative research. You know the value of research in the public relations industry and how it's used to inform us in our decision making. You know what ethical practice is, you know the laws of communication, and you have some practical experience under your belt. Okay, so those are the pre-qualifiers in order to proceed with the APR process. And how does it work? You submit a formal application. It's $385. Some employers pay for it, some don't. All right, again, you have to look at the policies, professional development policies at your place of employment. What we recommend is you attend a prep course and you study. We offer a prep course through PRSA Philadelphia. There's also a national PRSA prep course that we do that's on demand online, asynchronous. You prepare for and complete what's called a readiness review, where we put together 3 other APRs. You come in, there's a document that you create about 20 pages, which pretty much just outlines a campaign that you either managed or you contributed to in some significant way from start to finish, soup to nuts. So it starts with what the problems are, perceived communication challenges, what's the situation analysis, what's the research, who are the audiences, what are the goals, what are the objectives, strategies, tactics, evaluation, right? From soup to nuts. And you tell us about that. And then after you tell us about that, we decide if you're ready to sit for the test or not, the three panelists. And the panels I've done so far as the APR chair, nobody's failed, all right? I work hand in hand with the folks who do this to help get them to the point where they're ready to pass the readiness review. And I also help them so they're ready to pass the exam itself. So after you pass the readiness review, you do some more studying, some more self-reflection. The panelists will give you specific recommendations on what aspects to study to prepare for this exam. You sit for a formal computer-based exam, which is we now have the ability to do that remotely. The readiness review panels are remote as well over Zoom because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank Kathy Mulvihill in New York at PRSA for making that happen for us. Once you sit for the exam, it's like 170 questions, I think. You have to get at least a 70%. You can see on the PR accreditation website there that I put up on the slide. It'll tell you what the key knowledge areas are and what weight each area has. So research is worth like 35%. Meanwhile, history of public relations is only worth like 1%. You might get one question about Ivy Lee or Eddie Bernays, but you're going to get all kinds of questions about research and how to apply it and this, that, and the other. And I can tell you, as being one of the people who worked with PRSA National to shape some of the questions, most of the questions are scenario based. So you'll get a question like, you're the PR director for a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, and you get a call from the customer service manager that 500 people have called complaining of headaches after taking your medicine. What are the first 3 things you do? And then you'll get a list of 6 things, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And you'll read each one. You say, yeah, well, I do that. I do B, I do C, I do all of them. But then you have to rethink, wait a minute, how would I answer this for the computer that's grading my exam, right? And so you have to pick 3 of those 6 answers. And if you pick 2 of the 3, you get the question wrong. So it's a real difficult test to take. That's why you don't do it right out of college. That's why PRSA recommends you have at least 5 years experience. The whole process to get your APR takes about a year. You have a year to get it done. All right. Once you put your application in, get approved by Kathy up at PRSA New York, you have a year to get it done. And I'm here to help you in any way, shape possible. Once you get it, every 3 years, you have to have 10 points of professional development. And there's a form on the PRSA accreditation website that shows you. If you're a teacher, you get a point for each credit hour. So I teach a 4-credit course. So in 3 semesters, I'm done. I get 12 points in 3 semesters. So I'm good to go. But if you do a panel like this, you get a point. If you're an officer at in the PRSA local organization, you get some points. If you mentor someone to get the APR, you get some points. If you write a textbook, you get some points. If you earn a graduate degree in this time period, in the 3 years, you get automatic reaccreditation. So you have to keep up with it. You have to keep it current. It costs $50 every 3 years. And I don't look at it as a cost. I look at it as an investment. That $50 over 3 years is pennies. That's pennies for the 3 years and the opportunities having this APR gives me. I have found, this is anecdotal, I would write things for PRSA Tactics or back in the day, PR News that came out every week. I would write things and submit them. Nobody would touch them. As soon as I got my APR, oh, Jake, we'll publish this, we'll publish that, we'll publish this. All right. So it does benefit to have it. And pre-COVID, you look on the PRSA job bank that we send out, that our chapter sends out to the members, there are jobs listed. APR preferred, right? So it is a valuable credential to have in this industry. If you have any questions whatsoever, if you think this is something that might be for you, please send me an email. My email address is on there. I'm happy to help you in this in any way, shape, or form. All of us on the line are happy to help in any way, shape, or form as well. If you have any questions as it comes to a graduate school or need some advice or some coaching, things of that nature. So we're at the formal section here of Q&A. We'll put our contact information up here on the screen for everybody. I can't see a chat, so hopefully somebody on the line from PRSA can see the chat and see if we have any questions. And if we do, let's hear what they are, and we will happily address them.
Thanks, Jake. It's Steph. I'll go ahead and jump in. I know a couple of these questions were answered as you went through, but John Cooten was asking about newly minted undergrads jumping into a master's without any plan. He encourages emerging pros to find a job and negotiate tuition support from an employer. Any thoughts on this strategy? And you guys touched on that a little bit. So if anybody wants to weigh a little bit more in on that, or I can move to the next.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who did that, I would love to answer. So I saw a lot of people in my graduate program who to me should not have been there because they did not have a plan. In my opinion, getting your master's is a great step. I, fully concur with Jake, and I think that it can do wonders for your earning potential, but it won't do that if you're passively attending class. If you're just going through the motions and applying to a grad school because you think that's the next logical step, that grad school is not for you if you don't have an idea of what you want out of it. Now, obviously, like I talked at length about my experience just to kind of illustrate that life will throw a curveball at you at some point. I think that, John, it's a great advice to, tell people who are graduating, if you're applying for jobs right out of undergrad, take a look at your compensation package. The same way that I looked at, all of these graduate programs and tried to find financial aid in there and beg, borrow, and steal whatever I could. If you're, applying for that account coordinator position right out of grad school, take a look, at what that employer has to offer. Do they have comprehensive employee career paths? Is this somewhere where you can see what your mobility will be over time? Is this a company that's invested in its is this a company that's invested in its employees' growth? And if not, that might not be the place for you. And I'll be the first to admit that, I had some jobs that were either consultancy positions, or they were with really small companies that, they didn't really have an employee plan or a career path, or it was a family owned company and HR was a little loosey goosey. We've all been there, right? So, to me, if you're just graduating, you don't think you're financially able to attend grad school just yet, and you haven't found that right position for you that, speaks to you, that their professional connections aren't really speaking to you, you don't have to go right away. You can wait until you find a program that's right for you, and you can continue working in that time, whether you're working, in PR, starting at the bottom rung, account coordinator, what have you. You can still work towards your APR. You can still, think about what you really want out of a master's degree.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too. Just from a practical standpoint, as somebody who hires employees, there are plenty of jobs that I've posted for my department that were master's preferred. And with that, also another big piece of criteria for you to get the job was experience. So having the master's degree is great, but if you don't have that experience, then a lot of employers aren't even going to look at your resume because you haven't met the minimum requirements for that job from an experience standpoint. So to me, it's if you're not ready to jump right in and get your master's, or if you're comfortable with getting your master's and then not being able to get a job that requires that degree because you don't have the experience, then fine. But a little bit of advice: go look at job listings. Look at what the criteria is for you to get the job. If you're seeing a lot that are bachelors, you have limited experience, but you're going to be getting great experience in the job that you can then apply to your application for graduate school. To me, that's a win-win. So, doing your research and looking at job postings to see what that criteria is could help shape what direction you take.
Jeff, Ashley, I would just add, and John, great that you're with us tonight. I'm glad you're on the line. I hope everybody's well your way during the pandemic. Great question. I would just add a different perspective to this. I had a great professor back when I was at Salem Community College who said to me, if you ever get the opportunity to go to grad school, go right away. And he didn't talk about the job market. He didn't talk about experience. He didn't talk about the very essential points that Ashley and Jeff just made, right? He talked about it more from a life perspective. Recognize I came from poverty, country poor, down Salem County. You have an opportunity to go and they're going to pay for it. You go and you get it done because you're still in school mode. You don't have a mortgage. You don't have kids. You don't have a wife. You don't have a car payment. Go and get it done. You're going to have to start, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. You still got to start at the bottom in your industry when you get out with that master's degree and gain that experience, as Jeff was just talking about. But if you have the opportunity, go get it out of the way, And let me tell you something. I did both. I went straight through and then I went back as a returning adult learner in an accelerated doctoral program. And I can tell you the 5 years in that doctoral program was hell. It was hell. The worst 5 years of my life. But I persisted and I got through. And the payoff, I'll tell you, the payoff's incredible. It's great when it's done because you never have to worry about it again. I can still go and do workshops and seminars and post-doctoral studies if I wanted to do that. But that pressure to get the dissertation done or the pressure to get that paper done or the pressure to get this, it's not there. You go at your own pace. So I would say if you have the opportunity to go while you're still in school mode, go. And you'll deal with the consequences of that decision and the benefits of that decision when the day comes, right? It's pros and cons. You got to weigh them both. But if you have the opportunity to go straight through, my advice is always go straight through. If you have if you get an assistantship and everything aligns like it did for me, like it did for Ashley.
Jumping to another topic, the APR. We have an APR question. I started the APR prep course during the pandemic, wondering if I need the latest textbook or can I use a prior edition to do a little bit of savings with the cost of the book?
Use the prior, it's fine. Call me. If you're in the Philadelphia chapter, email me and we'll talk and we'll get you through it. We'll get you your APR, you'll be fine. You can use the previous textbook. There's like, I think PRSA recommends 12 different textbooks, and that's just to make sure that, various PRSA members who've written textbooks aren't offended that my textbook's not listed, right? This isn't being recorded, I hope. But you can, the book to have is the most recent version of the Associated Press and Style Guide. You got to have the most recent version of that because particularly the libel manual that's in it. They're not going to ask you where, do you need a second comma in a series of 3? They're not going to ask you that. But the libel manual and the communication law section of that AP style book, that you have to have the most recent version of. And that's what, 30, 40 bucks at the most. That's an investment. But any of the other PR textbooks, and I can tell you, being a teacher, I have the teacher's versions of these textbooks. And before the test, a few days before I took my test, I did the whole quiz sections. Didn't help me one lick. I sat for the exam because, like I said, most of the questions are scenario based. So no textbook is going to tell you how to answer that question. Now, I'm not saying don't get a textbook, and I'm not saying don't study. I'm saying any textbook's fine. That's on the list. Any textbook that's on the PRSA list. Don't get my textbook. My textbook's not on the list.
Marion said thank you.
Anytime, Marion.
She's a former journalist coming over to our side of the world.
Good deal. You'll make more money. Get that money.
Just one more comment that I'll add about the questions because it was answered and we're a little bit over time and want to be mindful to wrap up before everybody jumps off and leaves us hanging here. One thing somebody had asked about balancing schoolwork with full-time job and family, and it was really great that Jeff could answer that pretty well with how to balance. I definitely want to give a thanks to all of you for giving your knowledge tonight and sharing it and just giving a different perspective. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our panelists do as well. And so thank you. Thank you for being a part of this series that we have. And thanks for sharing your knowledge and your information and your contact. And we'll be sure to hopefully encourage some people to take the next step in their education.
Well,
Thanks
good
so
luck,
much for
everyone.
having
Yep.
us.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure participating. And I hope, if we can provide any, extra advice to incentivize someone's decision, I'd be more than willing to offer that.
Agreed. Please email me. Please reach out. I love talking to people about, you know, whatever it is that you're thinking might inspire you to go to grad school. I'd love to talk to you about it. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
And these are great people. These are great people I've worked with. Jeff and I have worked together a while. Ashley and I have worked together a while. These are great people, genuine people who want to help others. And thank you, Stephanie, and the members of the board for giving us this opportunity. We hope all of you who participated this evening got something out of this. More importantly, just remember, no matter what, you can do it. You can do it. It's possible. And the benefits far outweigh not having the credential. Believe me when I tell you, the benefits far outweigh when you have the credential. So thank you, everybody.
Just one more final note. Everybody's given you some great kudos and well done and thank you and great workshop. So with that, we'll end our evening and hopefully you can join us for another upcoming PRSA event. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe.